Akiko insisted we call the police again. This time, she was armed. Not with a weapon, but with something far more devastating to the likes of Karen. Facts, figures, and irrefutable proof of value. She had a neatly typed list of the deceased fish, their specific Japanese breeds, their lineage where known, their show records, if any, and a coldly conservative estimated replacement value for each. Officers Miller and Davies arrived, their expressions radiating a weary, here we go again vibe. Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Tanaka, Officer Davies began, flipping open his notepad with a sigh that could have powered a small windmill. Another issue with the Homeowners Association, is it? Yes, officer, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Akiko stood beside me, a portrait of icy calm. Our HOA president, Karen Henderson, whom you spoke with regarding the tree incident some months ago, deliberately drained our private koi pond yesterday morning. This action resulted in the death of multiple, highly valuable fish and has endangered the health of the survivors. The silence hit me first. Not a peaceful, early Saturday morning silence, but a dead, unnatural quiet. The kind of quiet that screams something is terribly wrong. My bare feet padded onto the patio flagstones, coffee mug warming my hands, and I stopped dead. The gentle, familiar burble of the waterfall feature in Akiko's meticulously designed koi pond was gone. Vanished. In its place, a thick, cloying silence and a horrifyingly still, muddy basin where shimmering water and graceful, living jewels should have been. No, I whispered, the word a puff of disbelief in the cool morning air. No, no, no. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The water level was down, catastrophically down, by at least 2/3, and there, in the exposed, rapidly drying muck, were flashes of vibrant orange, pearlescent white, deep sumi black, Akiko's koi, her champions, her babies, gasping, floundering. Some, horrifyingly, were already still, their brilliant colors a grotesque contrast to the dark, sucking mud. A garden hose, like a guilty green serpent, snaked over the fence from Karen Henderson's yard. A pathetic trickle of water dribbling from its end onto her prize-winning, aggressively saffron-yellow azaleas. My blood didn't just boil, it flash-vaporized. My coffee mug shattered on the flagstones, the sound loud in the awful stillness. I didn't even register it. Primal panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. Akiko was in Japan, judging the All-Japan Young Koi Show in Niigata, an event so prestigious in her world it was like the Olympics and the Nobel Prize ceremony rolled into a one. She'd left me in charge of her living art, her meticulously curated collection of nishiki-goi, and now this. This abomination. Not on my watch, I snarled to the empty yard, adrenaline surging, and I scrambled, a man possessed. Buckets from the garage, the kid's old inflatable paddling pool hastily dragged from the shed, anything that could hold water. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely uncoil our own hose. I started a frantic, clumsy rescue, scooping up the gasping, mud-caked fish, their normally sleek bodies feeling alien and rough. Emperor Hirohito, Akiko's magnificent ghost koi, nearly 3 feet of ethereal grace, was already gone. His eye, usually so intelligent and aware, was dull. A sob escaped me. Snow Princess, a pearl-white platinum ogon, was still breathing, but barely. I got her into a bucket of fresh water, my heart aching with every shallow gasp she took. Then I saw her. Karen, our HOA president, the self-appointed guardian of Sunny Meadows Estate's moral and aesthetic rectitude. She was standing by her fence, arms crossed, a pair of secateurs in one hand, watching my frantic efforts with an expression of smug, unadulterated satisfaction. She was actually watering her roses with a fine mist from a spray bottle. The picture of leisurely Saturday morning gardening, while my wife's life's passion lay dying a few feet away, thanks to the hose still siphoning their lifeblood into Karen's award-winning azalea bed. My vision tunneled. I stalked towards her, water and mud dripping from my hands. "Karen!" My voice was a raw, ragged thing, barely recognizable as my own. "What have you done? Are you insane?" She looked up, feigning surprise, though her eyes glinted with malice. "Oh, good morning, Mark. Lovely day, isn't it? Just rectifying a little neighborhood blight, you know. That stagnant pond of yours was becoming a terrible mosquito breeding ground. And frankly, the smell on humid days, quite offensive." She gestured vaguely with her secateurs. "Smell? Mosquitoes?" I was practically vibrating with rage. "Karen, these are valuable koi. Akiko's prize-winning fish. You're killing them. You drained our pond into your flower beds, you monster!" Karen actually scoffed. A delicate, dismissive sound. She snipped a perfect, dewy rosebud from one of her bushes. "Don't be so dramatic, Mark. They're just fish. And according to HOA Bylaw 17, subsection F, paragraph 3, unmaintained or unsanitary water features constituting a potential health hazard, or eyesore, are subject to immediate remediation by the HOA. I'm simply doing my job as president, protecting property values and public health." She smiled, a thin reptilian curve of her lips. "Unmaintained?" I spluttered. "Akiko spends hours out here. It has a state-of-the-art multi-stage filtration system that probably costs more than your entire landscaping budget for the year. You had no right. This is vandalism, destruction of valuable property, animal cruelty." Karen raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, the one that always made her look like she was perpetually smelling something unpleasant, which, to be fair, around her, often felt true. "Really, Mark, such hyperbole. I saw an issue threatening the community, and I addressed it. Proactively. You should be thanking me. Perhaps now you can finally install a nice HOA-approved rock garden. Much tidier, less aquatic." She turned back to her roses, dismissing me as if I were a mildly annoying gnat. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the woman was breathtaking. I wanted to scream, to rage, I didn't know what. But Akiko's fish were still dying. I turned back to my grim task. My heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. This wasn't over. This wasn't even the beginning of over. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone. Buckets of fish everywhere, damp towels strewn about, the floor gritty with mud. The lingering metallic scent of stressed fish and pond water filled the air. I managed to get most of the survivors into the paddling pool with an aerator buzzing frantically. But the big ones, the ones Akiko had poured years of care and expertise into, several were gone. Emperor Hirohito, 2 of her best Showa. My hands were still shaking as I dialed Akiko's international number. It was late evening for her in Niigata. She'd be tired, probably exhilarated from a day of judging some of the world's finest young koi. And I had to deliver this gut punch. "Akiko? Honey? It's Mark." My voice was hoarse. "Something terrible has happened. You need to come home as soon as you can. It's the pond. It's Karen." There was a pause. Then Akiko's voice, usually so calm and precise, sharpened with alarm. "Mark? What's wrong? What about the pond? Are the fish okay? Did the new pump fail?" "No, not the pump," I said, my throat tightening. "She drained it, Akiko. Karen. She drained most of it into her yard. I tried to save them, but some didn't make it." I heard a sharp, distinct intake of breath on her end. Silence stretched for a moment, a terrible, crackling void. "Drained it?" Akiko's voice was dangerously quiet now, a low thrum of controlled fury. How? Why? Which ones, Mark? Tell me exactly which ones are gone. The koi judge, the expert, was emerging, pushing through the wife's shock. My voice cracked as I listed the casualties I could identify. Hirohito. He's gone. Snow Princess is very weak. I don't know if she'll make it. A few of the smaller kohaku. I don't know, honey. It's a goddamn mess. I'm on the first flight back, Akiko stated, her voice now pure steel. There was no hysteria, just an icy resolve that frankly terrified me more than any screaming would have. Don't touch anything else unless it's absolutely critical to keep the survivors alive. Document everything, Mark. Photos, videos, times, temperatures. Get statements if any neighbors saw anything. Everything. Hours later, Akiko arrived. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her face pale but set with a grim, unyielding determination. She didn't cry, not then. She bypassed me at the door, her luggage dropped in the hallway, and went straight to the backyard. She moved like a field surgeon arriving at a mass casualty event, her focus absolute. I watched, helpless, as Akiko, still in her smart travel clothes, knelt by each temporary tank and the now filled paddling pool. Her examination of each survivor was swift, but incredibly thorough. She gently cupped the struggling Snow Princess in her hands, her touch feather-light, murmuring to the magnificent white fish in soft Japanese. Her knowledge was so profound, her connection to these creatures so deep, it was humbling. She identified each survivor, assessed their stress levels, noted signs of abrasion from the muddy, frantic ordeal, checked their gill function. Then she turned to the row of casualties I'd laid out on damp towels under the shade of the patio umbrella. She knelt beside Emperor Hirohito. He was, even in death, a magnificent fish, nearly 3 feet of ghostly shimmering scales, a ghost koi of unparalleled grace. Akiko had raised him from a tiny, unimpressive fry, spotting his potential when no one else did. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a judge pronouncing sentence. This was not just a ghost koi, Mark. This was a Gosanka derivative, a Ginrin Ochiba Shigur, to be precise. His lineage traces directly back to the Dainichi Showa line through his Sumi patterning. She gently traced the line of Hirohito's dorsal fin with a fingertip. He won Young Champion at the All England Koi Show 3 years ago. His estimated value, before this, conservatively, at least $25,000, probably significantly more to a dedicated collector of unique Ginrin varieties. My jaw literally dropped. $25,000 for one fish. I knew Akiko's koi were valuable. I'd seen the expensive imported food and the complex filtration system, but the numbers she was now calmly reciting were from another planet. Akiko moved to the next fish, a beautiful pearl-white creature. Snow Princess, that platinum ogon. She was being conditioned as a contender for Best in Size 4 and Champion Ginrin at next year's ZNA NorCal show. Her skin quality, the fukurin, it was flawless. Flawless. Her voice caught, just for a second. She pointed to another, smaller casualty, one with a perfect red circle on its head. That little one? That was a Tancho Sanke. The high marking was perfectly symmetrical, perfectly placed. 1 in perhaps 10,000 Tancho have that kind of perfection. She was young, but her potential easily worth more than most people's cars, Mark. She continued down the line, each fish not just a name, but a history, a lineage, a list of accolades or future promise, and a staggering monetary value. The mosquito puddle Karen had so cavalierly destroyed wasn't just a collection of pets. It was an aquatic Fort Knox, a living gallery of priceless swimming art. And Karen, in her infinite ignorance, had just taken a sledgehammer to it. The full, horrifying scale of what our HOA president had done was only just beginning to dawn on me. And the look in Akiko's eyes told me that Karen Henderson was about to receive an education she would never, ever forget. Akiko insisted we call the police again. This time she was armed, not with a weapon, but with something far more devastating to the likes of Karen. Facts, figures, and irrefutable proof of value. She had a neatly typed list of the deceased fish, their specific Japanese breeds, their lineage where known, their show records, if any, and a coldly conservative estimated replacement value for each. Officers Miller and Davies arrived, their expressions radiating a weary, "Here we go again" vibe. "Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Tanaka," Officer Davies began, flipping open his notepad with a sigh that could have powered a small windmill. "Another issue with the Homeowners Association, is it?" "Yes, officer," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Akiko stood beside me, a portrait of icy calm. "Our HOA president, Karen Henderson, whom you spoke with regarding the tree incident some months ago, deliberately drained our private koi pond yesterday morning. This action resulted in the death of multiple, highly valuable fish and has endangered the health of the survivors." Officer Miller shifted his weight. "Drained a fish pond? Sir, with all due respect, is this another bylaw dispute or a disagreement about pond maintenance?" Akiko stepped forward then, her presence suddenly commanding. "Officers," she stated, her voice clear and devoid of emotion. "These are not ordinary goldfish from a carnival. These are highly specialized pedigreed nishikigoi, a protected class of ornamental carp. I am an internationally certified koi show judge, a member of the Zen Nippon Arinkai, and a breeder of show-quality koi." She handed Officer Davies the meticulously prepared list. "The 7 fish Mrs. Henderson killed yesterday morning, through her direct actions, have a collective conservative replacement value currently exceeding $70,000 US. This constitutes significant destruction of private property. Furthermore, given their specialized nature and the manner of their deaths, asphyxiation in mud, we believe this also constitutes animal cruelty under State Statute 597, Section B." Officers Miller and Davies exchanged a surprised look. They actually took the time to read the list Akiko handed them. I watched as their eyebrows climbed steadily towards their hairlines. $70,000 for fish, Officer Davies finally managed, looking from the paper to Akiko and back again, as if trying to reconcile the numbers with the concept. Akiko met his gaze evenly. "Some individual koi, officer, particularly grand champions at major international shows like the All Japan, can sell for hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars at auction. This is a serious and globally recognized field of avocation and investment. We wish to file a formal complaint for felony destruction of private property and animal cruelty against Mrs. Karen Henderson." The officers were still a bit bewildered, clearly out of their depth, but the sheer audacity of the dollar figures and Akiko's unwavering expert demeanor finally seemed to penetrate their skepticism. They agreed to file a comprehensive report, meticulously taking down Akiko's statement and photographing the deceased fish and the valuation documents. They still mumbled about it potentially being a complex civil matter, but this time there was a clear financial crime aspect that they couldn't ignore. The word felony hung in the air. Our next task was to find out exactly how Karen had accomplished her act of aquatic vandalism. We quickly discovered she hadn't hired professional pond maintenance or drainage services. That would have involved quotes, invoices, and a paper trail. Things Karen, in her supreme confidence, probably deemed unnecessary. No, she'd apparently cajoled, or more likely bullied, the HOA's regular handyman, a lanky, perpetually bewildered teenager named Kevin, into doing the dirty work. Kevin usually just mowed the common area lawns and occasionally fished stray frisbees out of the community pool gutters. Pond draining, especially of a high-tech koi habitat, was decidedly above his pay grade and expertise. We found Kevin nervously trimming the hedges near the community pool, looking like he was expecting a SWAT team to rappel down from the clubhouse roof at any moment. "Kevin," I said gently. Akiko standing beside me, radiating a quiet intensity. "We need to talk to you about Mrs. Henderson and what happened to our pond yesterday." Kevin visibly paled, nearly lopping off the top of a perfectly innocent boxwood. "Oh man, oh geez. Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Tanaka, I'm so sorry. She told me it was just a mucky old puddle. She said it was full of bugs and algae, and she wanted it cleaned out before the HOA barbecue next week. She said the fish in there were just like minnows or something, and she'd scoop them out first before I started the pump." Akiko's voice was soft, but with an edge of surgical steel. "And did she scoop them out, Kevin? Did you see her make any attempt to remove the fish safely?" Kevin shook his head miserably, his Adam's apple bobbing. "No, ma'am, not at all. She just pointed at the submersible pump the HOA keeps for, like, pool emergencies, and said, 'Get that disgusting water out of there. It's attracting vermin.' I even saw some of those big, colorful fish flopping around when the water started getting real low. And I told her, I said, 'Mrs. Henderson, there are some really big fish in there.' But she just waved her hand and said, 'Oh, don't worry about those. Less for the raccoons to eat then.' And she went back inside her house." My stomach churned. "Less for the raccoons to eat then?" Akiko's eyes, if possible, grew even colder. This woman's callousness was as boundless as her destructive ignorance. Kevin, seeing our expressions, looked like he was about to be sick. He was just a kid, caught in the crossfire of Karen's war on joy. He became our reluctant but crucial witness. His testimony would place the responsibility for this disaster squarely and solely on Karen Henderson. While I was dealing with the grim logistics of police reports and terrified teenage handymen, Akiko was a whirlwind of focused energy. Her phone became an extension of her ear. She wasn't just calling friends for sympathy, she was mobilizing an international network of koi experts. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, no relation, thankfully, but a legend in koi veterinary medicine based in California, a man who literally wrote the book on Nishikigoi pathology, agreed to fly in the next morning. His job? To perform official necropsies on our deceased champions for the police report and insurance claim, and to assess the health and long-term prognosis of the traumatized survivors. Mr. Alistair Finch, a dapper, highly respected Nishikigoi appraiser from the UK, whom Akiko knew from judging panels in Europe, was already checking flight availability to provide a formal, on-site valuation of the losses. Even local experts began to arrive, alerted by the rapidly spreading whispers in the koi community. Takahashi-san, the owner of a high-end koi supply store in the city and president of the local koi club, rushed over as soon as he heard. He walked into our backyard, which now resembled a field hospital for fish, took one look at Akiko's grim face, then peered into the quarantine tank holding the barely breathing snow princess. His eyes widened in recognition and horror. "Akiko-san," he exclaimed, his voice hushed with disbelief. "What in the world has happened here? Is that your magnificent Shiro Utsuri from the All Berkshire Koi Show? Her pectoral fin appears to be severely abraded." Akiko nodded, her expression tight. "An act of deliberate vandalism, Takahashi-san, perpetrated by our Homeowners Association president." Takahashi-san looked around at the scene of devastation, the empty pond, the buckets, the air pumps buzzing frantically, Then at me, his eyes filled with a newfound, almost reverent respect. "Your wife is Akiko Tanaka," he breathed. "The Zen Nippon Ironkai certified judge? The one who identified the grand champion at last year's Shinkakai All Japan? I had no idea we had such a luminary, such a treasure, in our humble neighborhood." "Yeah, well," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "Neither did our HOA president, apparently. She just thought it was a smelly puddle full of minnows." The cavalry was assembling, and these weren't just any experts. These were people who knew Akiko, revered her reputation, and understood with chilling clarity the profound gravity of what had been lost, not just in monetary terms, but in terms of genetics, artistry, and years of dedicated passion. The sense that Karen Henderson was in way over her perfectly coiffed head was becoming deliciously palpable. Of course, while Akiko was coordinating a multi-state, soon-to-be international response team of elite koi specialists, Karen was busy with her own little counteroffensive. Another crisp, powder blue envelope, delivered by the mailman with an almost apologetic air, appeared in our mailbox. I half expected it to tick. This time it was an official HOA violation notice for maintaining a hazardous and unsanitary artificial pond contributing to pestilence, mosquitoes, and olfactory offense to neighboring properties. The fine? A cool $300. The action required? Permanent removal of said unauthorized pond structure within 7 calendar days. Failure to comply will result in HOA contracted removal and remediation at the homeowner's full and considerable expense. But wait, there was more. Attached to this missive with a rusty paperclip was a neatly typed bill on HOA letterhead for emergency pond drainage services rendered, $150. Presumably for poor Kevin's traumatized time and the loan of the HOA's submersible pump. I carried the notice into the house with a pair of barbecue tongs, as if it were contaminated with a rare tropical disease. "Akiko," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You are not going to believe this. She's actually fining us for the pond she herself destroyed, and billing us for the privilege of its destruction. And now she's demanding we remove its corpse permanently." Akiko took the notice from the tongs, her expression an unreadable mask of icy composure that, frankly, was far more terrifying than any outburst of rage would have been. She read it through twice. A tiny muscle twitched in her jaw. "This woman," she said finally, her voice soft but laced with something akin to awe at the sheer audacity, "is remarkably, almost artistically audacious. Keep this, Mark. Every piece of paper, every communication, it will all be very useful for Mr. Finch's report. And for our lawyer." "Useful for what?" I muttered internally. "Building a funeral pyre for her public image with her as the guest of honor? Because I'm rapidly starting to think that's a viable and highly attractive option." Karen, completely oblivious to the storm of expert fury and impending financial doom gathering directly over her head, was not just digging her own grave anymore. She was lining it with imported silk and sending out engraved invitations for the burial. Akiko didn't have to do much to light the fuse under the global koi community. Once word got out that Dr. Kenji Tanaka was flying in from California for emergency veterinary consultations, and that Alistair Finch, one of the UK's top Nishikigoi appraisers, was making an unscheduled transatlantic trip to assess a significant collection loss, the koi grapevine exploded. Takahashi-san, from the local club, after witnessing the devastation firsthand, posted a carefully worded but clearly horrified notice on several influential online koi forums and Facebook groups about a shocking tragedy befalling a highly respected ZNA member's prized collection due to egregious third-party negligence. He didn't name names, but the details were specific enough. The koi world, you see, is a surprisingly tight-knit, intensely passionate, and often very well-funded global village. These people don't just raise colorful fish as a casual hobby. They dedicate their lives, and often small fortunes, to the pursuit of aquatic perfection. An attack on one serious hobbyist's collection, especially one belonging to a breeder and internationally recognized judge of Akiko's stature, was viewed as an attack on them all. It was a desecration. Emails and messages of support started pouring into Akiko from fellow judges, breeders, and club presidents from as far afield as South Africa, Australia, and, of course, Japan. Offers of advice, assistance, even donations of young, promising fish from their own breeding programs to help rebuild Akiko's collection, though she politely declined these for now, flooded her inbox. Karen Henderson wasn't just dealing with an unhappy couple in her little suburban fiefdom anymore. She had, with breathtaking ignorance, poked a very large, very angry, and very well-connected global hornet's nest. These were people who thought nothing of spending 5 figures on a single fish, who flew thousands of miles to attend shows, and who had lawyers on speed dial to protect their living jewels. The president of the Pan American Koi Fanciers Association, PACFA, a distinguished-looking gentleman named Arthur Blackwood, whom Akiko knew well from the international judging circuit, called her personally. I listened in on Akiko's end of the conversation, a growing sense of awe and a touch of vindictive glee building within me. "Yes, Arthur, thank you for calling. It is indeed true," Akiko said, her voice tinged with a weary sadness but still firm. "A terrible, terrible situation. Yes, my Ginrin Ochiba, Hirohito, was one of them. That's very kind of you to say. He was a special fish. An official PACFA statement regarding the incident?" "Yes, I understand the association might want to comment on the importance of respecting and securing valuable private collections from uninformed interference. A legal defense fund contribution? Oh, Arthur, that's incredibly generous, but I don't believe we'll need charity. The individual responsible, and by extension the HOA, will be held fully accountable. Yes, absolutely. I will keep you and the PACFA board fully informed of Mr. Finch's official appraisal values and all subsequent actions taken against the perpetrator." I mouthed, "Perpetrator?" at Akiko. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. An official statement from PACFA? Discussions of legal defense funds? This was escalating faster than a viral cat video that had somehow learned to code its own memes. Karen Henderson was about to become globally infamous, and not in the won-the-neighborhood bake-off with her surprisingly moist zucchini bread kind of way. She was about to become a cautionary tale, a legend whispered in hushed, horrified tones at koi shows from Tokyo to Toronto. Remember what happened to Akiko Tanaka's collection, all because of that one clueless HOA president? The anticipation of Karen's inevitable reckoning was almost delicious. The day of reckoning arrived with the subtlety of a fireworks factory exploding in a library. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, looking every bit the renowned aquatic veterinary scientist in his crisp lab coat, was meticulously examining Akiko's surviving koi in their temporary hospital tanks set up in our garage. His portable microscope and array of specimen slides were laid out with surgical precision. Mr. Alistair Finch, the appraiser from the UK, a dapper gentleman whose Savile Row suit seemed impervious to the general chaos, had his trusty jeweler's loupe permanently affixed to one eye as he pored over Akiko's voluminous records, photographs, and certificates of lineage for the deceased koi. Takahashi-san, our local koi club president, hovered nearby, acting as a solemn local liaison and occasionally shaking his head with a pained expression. Adding to the surreal atmosphere, a reporter from Koi World Quarterly magazine, a surprisingly young woman with an intensely focused gaze and a rapidly filling notebook, had flown in from San Diego after getting an urgent tip-off about an unprecedented act of aquatic vandalism against a major figure in the Nishiki-goi community. Our backyard, usually a haven of zen-like tranquility, now resembled a high-stakes international incident command center. An emergency HOA board meeting had been called, ostensibly at Karen's insistence. She, bless her ignorant heart, was still trying to enforce the permanent pond removal notice she'd so thoughtfully issued us. Little did she know that Akiko, with a Machiavellian glint in her eye that I found both terrifying and deeply attractive, had formally invited her assembled team of international experts to present their official findings to the HOA board before any discussion of pond removal could take place. The rest of the HOA board members, Treasurer Bob, who looked like he hadn't slept in days, Agnes from Unit 7, who clutched her pearls like they were a life raft, and two other grim-faced individuals were already gathered uncomfortably on our patio chairs, sipping nervously at the iced tea I'd reluctantly provided. Karen Henderson arrived last, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield, a look of grim, righteous determination plastered on her face. She clearly expected to steamroll us with her usual barrage of bylaw citations and pronouncements of community standards. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush armed with PhDs, international accreditations, and six-figure valuation reports. Akiko stood to address them. She wasn't angry, not outwardly. There was no shouting, no theatrics. She was the epitome of calm, professional authority, the kind that doesn't need to raise its voice to command a room, or, in this case, a patio. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson, esteemed board members," Akiko began, her voice clear and carrying easily in the suddenly still air. "Before we proceed to discuss your recent notice regarding the mandated removal of our pond, I believe it is imperative, for the sake of clarity and full disclosure, that you understand the precise nature and full implications of the actions taken by Mrs. Henderson last Saturday morning when she authorized, indeed directly supervised, the draining of said pond." Karen, predictably, couldn't resist interrupting, her voice sharp and defensive. "It was a demonstrable health hazard, Akiko, as I have repeatedly explained. It was breeding mosquitoes and emitting offensive odors. I was acting entirely within my purview as president, in the best interests of the community, as per Bylaw 17, subsection F, paragraph—" Akiko held up a hand, a small, graceful gesture that nevertheless cut Karen off mid-sentence with surprising finality. "Please, Mrs. Henderson," she said, her tone polite but utterly unyielding. "Allow me and my assembled colleagues to clarify for you exactly what was in that puddle you so diligently remediated. Mr. Finch, if you would be so kind as to begin." Mr. Alistair Finch, the dapper appraiser from the UK, stepped forward. He cleared his throat with a soft, cultured sound. He was holding a leather-bound binder that looked to be at least 6 inches thick and probably weighed more than Karen's entire collection of garden gnomes. "Good morning," Mr. Finch began, his voice carrying the crisp, precise diction of a BBC newsreader. "My name is Alistair Finch. I am a certified appraiser of Nishiki-goi, fully accredited by the British Koi Keepers Society, the European Koi Association, and the Zen Nippon Irinkai of Japan. I have had the distinct privilege of judging alongside Mrs. Tanaka at numerous international shows. At her request, I have flown here to conduct a formal on-site appraisal. I have thoroughly reviewed Mrs. Tanaka's extensive documentation, which includes photographic records, video evidence, certificates of lineage, and previous show records for all the affected koi. Based on current international market values, recent auction results for comparable specimens, genetic purity, conformation, skin quality, and overall championship potential, I have prepared a preliminary valuation report." He opened the substantial binder with a soft rustle of expensive paper. The tension on the patio was so thick you could have spread it on toast. "Let us begin with the deceased specimen known as Emperor Hirohito," Mr. Finch continued, adjusting his loupe. "This was a truly exceptional Ginrin Ochiba Shigur, male, approximately 85 centimeters in length, with a documented lineage tracing directly to the renowned Dainichi Showa line. This fish was a prior Grand Champion class winner at the All England Koi Show. Based on these factors, I have assigned Emperor Hirohito a conservative pre-incident valuation of £20,000 sterling. He paused, letting the figure sink in, then added, "At current exchange rates, that is approximately $25,300 US. A small, choked gasp escaped Agnes from Unit 7. Treasurer Bob looked like he was about to have a stroke. Karen, however, just looked momentarily confused, as if she were trying to do complex currency conversions in her head and coming up with a lot of fancy birdseed. Mr. Finch, oblivious or perhaps deliberately ignoring the mounting horror on the board members' faces, continued, his tone relentlessly professional. "Next, the deceased Tancho Sanke, female, 42 centimeters, exhibiting a perfect centrally placed high or red cranial marking. Such perfection is exceptionally rare. Valued at £8,000 sterling, or roughly $10,100 US. Then we have two high-grade Showa Sanshoku, both with excellent sumi and high patterning, valued collectively at £12,000 sterling, or approximately $15,200 US. He turned a page in his binder. The list, I regret to inform you, continues for several more pages. In total, the 7 deceased Nishikigoi, unlawfully destroyed, had an aggregate insured replacement value, and I must stress this is a conservative estimate, of £58,500 sterling. He looked directly at Karen. That is, Mrs. Henderson, approximately $74,000 US dollars. Silence. Utter, stunned, pin-drop silence. Even the birds in the neighbors' trees seemed to have stopped chirping. Karen's jaw was slack, her usually florid complexion now a sickly, pasty white. Her precious clipboard lay forgotten on the patio table beside her untouched iced tea. Mr. Finch wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he added, his voice like a funeral dirge, "the surviving koi, including the magnificent platinum ogon known as Snow Princess, and Mrs. Tanaka's prized Shiro Utsuri, have suffered significant physiological stress, potential permanent gill damage due to hypoxia, and numerous physical abrasions which will undoubtedly impact their future show potential and, consequently, their market value. They will require extensive specialized veterinary care and a prolonged recovery period. The devaluation of these survivors, combined with the anticipated medical costs, is still being assessed but is conservatively anticipated to be in the tens of thousands of additional US dollars. Now it was Dr. Kenji Tanaka's turn. He stepped forward, his demeanor serious and scientific, holding a slim file. "I have completed preliminary necropsies on the deceased specimens," he stated, his voice carrying the quiet authority of deep expertise. "The cause of death in all cases is consistent with acute hypoxia and asphyxiation, directly resulting from rapid dewatering and prolonged exposure to anaerobic muddy conditions. The high levels of ammonia and nitrites present in the residual water would have caused severe chemical burns to their delicate gill tissues. For highly specialized aquatic creatures like Nishikigoi, who require pristine water quality and consistently high, stable oxygen levels, this was, I must state for the record, a particularly stressful and inhumane way to perish." He looked pointedly at Karen. The stress on the survivors is immense. We are looking at months, possibly years, of dedicated care to bring them back to full health, if indeed a full recovery is even possible for some of them. Akiko then spoke, her voice still quiet, but now laced with a cold, razor-sharp fury that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. She addressed Karen directly. "They drowned in mud, Karen, suffocated, because you wanted to water your roses and you thought they were just fish from a dirty puddle." All eyes were now on Karen Henderson. The color had completely drained from her face, leaving it a mottled, unhealthy gray. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, like a beached fish herself, but no sound came out. Her usual bluster, her unshakable self-confidence, had utterly evaporated, leaving behind a bewildered, terrified shell of a woman. The coy World Quarterly reporter, I noticed with a thrill of vindictive pleasure, was discreetly angling her phone to capture Karen's expression of pure, unadulterated horror. But the bylaws," Karen finally managed, her voice a mere squeak, barely audible. "The mosquitoes. I didn't know, they were just fish from a garden pond." Treasurer Bob, who looked like he was about to throw up into Karen's prize-winning petunias, finally found his voice. It was shaky, but firm. "Karen," he croaked, "our HOA liability insurance. I've just pulled up the policy on my phone. I'm fairly certain it does not cover the negligent destruction of prize-winning, internationally pedigreed Japanese imperial carp valued at close to $100,000 due to unsanctioned presidential mosquito abatement initiatives." Karen Henderson visibly swayed. She reached out a trembling hand and groped for her chair. I think I need to sit down," she whispered. "I think I might be sick." The game was over. Karen's little reign of terror, built on a foundation of petty rules, blissful ignorance, and an unshakable belief in her own infallibility, had just come crashing spectacularly down around her ears. The coy Inquisition had rendered its verdict. The emergency HOA board meeting ended not with a discussion of pond removal notices, but with a flurry of frantic, hushed phone calls to the HOA's legal counsel and their bewildered insurance provider. I distinctly heard Treasurer Bob, his voice cracking with panic, uttering the phrase, "grossly negligent destruction of extremely high-value private property by an elected HOA official acting well outside the scope of reasonable judgment or fiduciary responsibility," several times into his phone. Agnes from Unit 7 was fanning herself vigorously with a copy of Mr. Finch's preliminary report, looking like she might faint. Karen, for once, was conspicuously silent. She sat slumped in her patio chair, looking small and shrunken, her usual vibrant, if aggressively patterned, attire suddenly seeming garish and out of place. The board, led by a now remarkably assertive Treasurer Bob, who, I suspected, was envisioning his own personal assets being liquidated to cover this fiasco, immediately and unanimously voted to suspend all of Karen Henderson's presidential duties and powers pending a full and thorough internal investigation, which everyone present knew was polite corporate speak for, "How in the Sam Hill do we fire her, distance ourselves from this unholy mess, and mitigate the impending financial apocalypse?" Our own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Miss Albright, whom Akiko knew through a mutual acquaintance in the fine art auction world. Apparently, high-end koi and Picassos share similar legal complexities, was already drafting sharply worded letters of intent to sue. The insurance adjuster who visited our property a few days later, a young man who probably thought he'd seen it all, looked visibly shaken, his professional composure cracking around the edges as Akiko calmly and methodically walked him through Mr. Finch's comprehensive valuation reports, complete with glossy photographs of the deceased champions in their prime. He kept muttering, "But they're fish?" To which Akiko would patiently reply, "Yes, Nishikigoi, living art, with documented lineage and international market values comparable to rare automobiles, or indeed small works by impressionist masters." He left looking pale and muttering about needing a very strong drink. Karen, when she finally found some semblance of her voice a few days later, in the form of a tearful, rambling, and typo-laden email circulated to all Sunny Meadows Estates homeowners, tried to spin the entire disaster as a grievous misunderstanding, and an overzealous, if perhaps ill-informed, attempt to protect community health and uphold our shared aesthetic standards. She even had the unmitigated gall to suggest that we were somehow at fault for not having a giant, neon-lit, multilingual sign in our backyard explicitly stating, "Warning, extremely expensive, internationally acclaimed Japanese koi reside within. Do not, under any circumstances, drain their habitat for casual rose hydration or mosquito abatement purposes. You have been warned." The neighborhood, predictably, was divided. Some of our more curmudgeonly residents, the ones who had always complained about everything from the rustling of autumn leaves to the cheerful but apparently disruptive laughter of children playing in the street, mumbled their reluctant support for Karen's good intentions, even if the execution was a bit off. Others, however, especially after the jaw-dropping dollar figures involved in Pondgate, as it was now gleefully being called, began to spread like wildfire through the neighborhood gossip channels, were utterly horrified. They flooded the remaining HOA board members' inboxes with demands for Karen's permanent removal from any position of authority, public censure, and even that she be held personally financially liable for the damages her ignorance had wrought. The Sunny Meadows Estates online forum became a war zone of accusations, counter-accusations, and poorly photoshopped memes involving Karen, mosquitoes, and very expensive-looking fish. It was, in a word, glorious. It took months of legal wrangling, tense negotiations with a shell-shocked HOA insurance company, who, after much high-level corporate hand-wringing, finally agreed to a substantial, though not quite full, payout, with the clear implication that their future coverage of Sunny Meadows Estates would involve premiums roughly equivalent to the annual budget of a small European principality, and the quiet, dignified dismantling of Karen Henderson's HOA career. She was, of course, formally voted out of office in a specially convened general meeting that had the atmosphere of a public flogging. She didn't even attend, submitting her resignation via a curt, one-sentence letter. Shortly thereafter, a "for sale" sign appeared on her meticulously manicured, but now somehow tainted front lawn. Rumor had it she was moving to a condo, with no yard, and definitely no ponds. With the insurance settlement finally in hand, and a not insignificant personal contribution from Karen herself, brokered by Miss Albright after a series of increasingly threatening legal letters, made it clear that bankruptcy was a very real possibility for our former president. The pond was rebuilt. Not just rebuilt, but reborn. Akiko, with the enthusiastic and often free-of-charge advice of her now globally aware network of koi experts, designed and oversaw the construction of a true koi paradise. It had a state-of-the-art multi-chamber filtration system that looked like something out of NASA, a perfectly calibrated aeration system, a dedicated quarantine tank, and even underwater LED lighting that made the water shimmer like liquid moonlight. It was, even to my untrained eye, a masterpiece of aquatic engineering and aesthetic beauty. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, during one of his follow-up consultation visits, he'd become a good friend, helped Akiko source a new generation of young, incredibly promising koi from some of the most respected breeders in Japan. They weren't replacements for Emperor Hirohito, or Snow Princess, who, against all odds, was slowly but steadily recovering under Dr. Tanaka's and Akiko's devoted care, a testament to her fighting spirit, or the others who had been lost. Those champions, Akiko said with a sad smile, were irreplaceable, each a unique work of living art. But these new arrivals, with their vibrant colors and flawless pedigrees, were a promise of future champions, a symbol of renewal. I found myself, much to my own surprise, utterly captivated. I learned the names, not just the spotty one or the big white one, but Akiko's carefully chosen Japanese names, Ryujin, the Dragon King, for a magnificent kohaku with a bold, flowing pattern. Kibo, meaning hope, for a tiny but perfectly formed sanka. Fushicho, the phoenix, for a striking showa that seemed to embody resilience. I even started to learn the finer points, to spot good fukurin, the subtle netting pattern of the scales that indicated high quality, and to understand the difference between a ginrin shimmer and a metallic sheen. I still couldn't tell a doitsu from a shusui to save my life, but I was learning. And I developed a fierce, almost territorial protectiveness for that pond and its inhabitants. Karen Henderson did eventually sell her house at a significant loss, I heard. The new neighbors seemed nice and blessedly uninterested in HOA politics or guerrilla gardening initiatives. Life on Elm Street and in Sunny Meadows Estates returned to a new, more informed, and significantly less tyrannical normal. The story of Pondgate became a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered at barbecues and block parties, a reminder that sometimes the quietest neighbors harbor the most extraordinary passions, and that ignorance, especially when armed with a little bit of power and a garden hose, can have astonishingly expensive consequences. I stood beside Akiko one cool evening, watching as she gently released a new, exquisitely patterned young koi into the pristine, moonlit water of the reborn pond. It swam away, a flash of living color, joining its fellows in their silent, graceful ballet. "Yeah?" I murmured, more to myself than to Akiko, thinking of Karen and her mosquito vendetta. She just thought they were fish. I looked at my wife, her face serene in the soft light, her eyes full of the quiet joy that these creatures brought her. "Turns out," I added, a grin spreading across my face, "my wife's little hobby could probably fund a small nation's GDP, and honestly, seeing that look of utter cataclysmic horror on Karen's face when Alistair Finch read out those valuations, almost worth the price of a championship-grade Tancho Sanke." I paused. Almost. Akiko just smiled, a small, enigmatic smile, and sprinkled a pinch of expensive imported koi food onto the water. The living jewels rose to meet it,